I got a call. Hey, we've got a job for you. I need to be there in 3 days.
Why did you decide that you wanted to learn Mandarin, and why go to China?
The language, little snippets of pinyin and how it's pronounced. I just thought it was interesting. I was just drawn to it for whatever reason. I spent a summer living at a friend's house on the beach. It was when the World Cup soccer was on, and every single bit of news, commercials, and everything had something to do with China. So I kind of took that as a message.
How did you build those networks, especially overseas? What advice could you give with the networking side of things to people that are starting off in their careers?
This podcast is your go-to guide for landing your dream job. Think of it as your free masterclass packed with all the tips, advice, and strategies you need to take your career to the next level.
In each episode, we will dive deep into those inspiring stories of professionals who've been exactly where you are today, searching for their next big career move.
From nailing the job hunt to securing that perfect role, we'll explore their challenges, breakthroughs, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Plus, you'll hear how they've grown personally and professionally throughout their journey.
I'm Pauline.
I'm Natasha.
And we are your career hosts, and we couldn't be more excited for you to join us along in this journey.
So welcome to
Career Reshaped, where your dream job is within reach.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Career Reshaped. We're your hosts, Natasha
and Pauline. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Shawn, and Shawn comes to us all the way from the USA, and he's had a very interesting career journey that started in America. He moved to China, Beijing, then to Hong Kong, and now he is in Australia, Melbourne. And I am really excited to dive deep to find out what created this amazing adventure and where his career started and what were the steps that he had taken to be in Australia, where now he is a managing director with Nutrition APEC. And Nutrition APEC is a company that distributes sports and healthy lifestyle products to gyms, supermarkets, and all these other places. I don't know. Shawn needs to be the one to explain to us in a little bit more detail. So I would love to introduce Shawn now to everybody. Shawn, welcome.
Thank you, Pauline. Nice to be here. Hello, Natasha.
We're really happy to have you with us today, Shawn.
Yes, thank you for joining.
Hopefully I can help give a little bit of info and insight into the journey I've taken, and it'll be interesting to have this chat today.
Yeah, and we hope that you can maybe inspire some people who feel that their careers might not take them on an adventure, and we will like to talk about how yours has and what were the things that led to it and what opportunities you saw that you decided to take advantage of. So I think, Natasha, you do have a question you'd like to start with?
I do. I guess the main thing would be to set the story for our guests today and our listeners today, and start off by what you first started with, what your ambitions were, maybe when you were in university or even high school. What goals did you have? And what steps did you take to try to achieve those goals?
Yeah, look, that goes back a ways now, but thinking back to that time, in university I was studying Mandarin, and so I didn't really have, I guess, a real direction that I wanted to take other than I wanted to use the language in China. All right, so that was kind of my path or guiding path, was that I wanted to get to China somehow, right? And so, while I was in uni, a lot of people were signing up. They're going into finance and going into corporate jobs and getting themselves lined up before they graduated. And for whatever reason, I didn't really have that pull. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I just knew I had this desire to use the language that I'd been studying for so long in China, right? So I just wanted to get there somehow.
So that's really interesting so far about your studies and the choice of doing a double major with your Mandarin classes. We're both really intrigued with that one. And I really love the fact that you chose something different. And that is what anchored you to your next steps. It's very different to other people where they a major in, finance or something like that, where your path followed a language. I find that very, very interesting.
So, can I ask you why? Why did you decide that you wanted to learn Mandarin, and why go to China? What was the pull?
Well, look, I studied, I took one class in high school. It was Chinese history, right? And I just,
Mm-hmm.
while taking that, just learning about the history and then seeing the language, little snippets of pinyin, which is how it's pronounced. I just thought it was interesting. I was just drawn to it for whatever reason. And I'd studied Japanese the summer before, and I was
Mm-hmm.
okay. Well, look, I want to have an interest in language. I want to pursue that. But then after I graduated high school, I spent a summer living at my friend's house on the beach, and it was when the World Cup soccer was on. We would
Mm-hmm.
stay up late. We'd come back from work, stay up late and watch the soccer. And every single bit of news and commercials and everything had something to do with China. So I kind of took
Interesting.
that as a message that probably should study Chinese instead of Japanese. So that's what I ended up doing. And
Wow.
Amazing.
and I guess, once I'd selected it and started, you get into it, and then all of a sudden a month has gone by and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can get out of this now. So just continued
Locked
on.
in.
But yeah, look, it certainly, like, there was no regrets in taking the language, and I really enjoy it today. And yeah, it was certainly, I guess, slightly different path. I just wanted to go down. I guess I was just driven to want to use something I'd spent so much time learning, and I didn't really,
Yeah.
Fair
I
enough.
didn't really mind, or I had an idea, but I didn't really mind how to do that, how I would do that. Right. So I actually lined up a job working for a company in China, right? All set to
Mm-hmm.
go, and then SARS broke out. So everything got,
Oh.
right. So it was a proper job working for, a corporate company. And then, with everything canceled, like, just in limbo, sitting around trying to figure out what to do. So I'd reached out to a number of contacts that, just to see what was out there. And I got a call, I guess, kind of when SARS was, everything was kind of coming back to normal. I got a call saying, "Hey, we've got a job for you. It's teaching English, but it's in Beijing, and you need to be there in 3 days." And so I was
Wow.
like, "Okay, let's go." So,
Amazing.
Well, that's
Amazing.
really great that you just jumped at that opportunity because, like you said, you wanted to use what you've spent so much time learning. So that's really good that you still took that opportunity,
yeah,
That's it. And also that you use your networks too.
which is something I know we're going to continue with your story, but that's actually a good point. With those networks, how did you build those networks, especially overseas? What advice can you give with the networking side of things to people that are starting off in their careers?
look, networking in general, I won't profess to be any good at it. I'll put it that way, right? So,
It worked for you so far.
look, what's worked is, I guess, just following. I think, there's a lot of pressure on people, and especially young people, to select what they want to do with their life. And I feel like that's a heavy thing to try to figure out at an early age. And I think what's worked for me is that, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I had an idea or a vision of kind of where I wanted to get to. And so done and, gone through in my journey has been based off of a loose, I'll call it a loose, for lack of a better term, but a loose vision that I had of kind of where I wanted to end up. And that was influenced by the experiences that I had, right? So I studied abroad in China in uni, and I'd gone to Australia, for a semester and studied there for a semester. And so, in my mind, when I first went abroad, I was like, look, I want to do something where I've got this language I'm using as part of my career, right? But then I thought, I'm only going to go to China for 1 year, maybe 2, right? And I thought, oh,
Right.
it might be cool to move to, spend some time in Hong Kong. And then ultimately I was like, I kind of wanted to come back and live in Australia for a period of time. So idea of what I wanted, but if you think of a picture, nothing was colored in, right? So didn't know what it was going to be, didn't know when it was going to be, didn't know how it was going to happen. But along the way, you talk to people, you meet people, you start discussing what you're doing, what you want to do, and then they can help. Some do, and they either give you some advice or direct you, on what's worked for them, or put you in touch with other people that they know. And so just pulling that thread and just continuing to, just be open to what comes to you. Right? I'm a strong believer in that things, your timing plays a massive part in where you end up getting to. And I think, as long as you're having conversations and you're open to what people are, either advising or, just talking to you about, or who you can meet, then quite often that will lead to opportunities. And it's up to you whether you take those opportunities or not.
Absolutely.
It's
Couldn't
amazing.
have said it better ourselves.
Yeah, it's so what I understand is that you had a plan, you thought a couple years here, a couple years there, but it wasn't really a couple of years, was it? And like you were saying, timing is
Well, it
everything.
didn't unfold quite the way I was planning. No. So I ended up being in
No,
China for 6 years total, right?
right?
So
That's
Okay.
much more than 1 year.
yeah. So the first, obviously I went across, I took whatever I could. So I taught English for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of that, they're like, hey, we want you to keep going. And I was like, oh, look, I've got no interest in continuing down this path. So, I was spending quite a lot of time trying to figure out what to do, and I wasn't really sure. So I started talking to my friends, right? And I was,
Right.
look, when you live abroad, you tend to fall into a bit of a community, and there was a bit of an expat community. And so we all knew each other pretty well. And so you talk to one person, they're like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so. They're doing something in that field. So I just started talking to people, and I ended up talking to a friend of a friend who ended up becoming a friend who worked in manufacturing. And so he would source, go to different factories in China and get things made to export to, in this case, back to Australia. So I found that really interesting, right? So I was like, okay, sourcing, this is something I want to look into. And so that's kind of, again, that influenced my decision as to what I wanted to do. And it gave me an idea, and I started interviewing and started looking for work where I could, work in that kind of industry, go to factories, source products, send them out to other companies around the world. Right? So that was kind of the first kernel of I guess, a seed of what I wanted to do. That was just, literally came about through casual conversations with people I met.
It's not something you had considered before or thought about before just having those conversations.
No, it wasn't. And it was more something, that in talking to, to different people, that was interesting to me. I thought it was quite exciting. It's something different all the time, right? You're going around to different places, something new. And so I liked the idea of it. So I just thought, let me try to pursue that.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of touch on that. It's very similar to the story that we were talking about last week, where you don't know where inspiration can come from. And the thing is that you're saying you're not very good at networking, but that is exactly what networking is. You're talking to friends and friends of friends. So people believe that networking is about you going to an event, rubbing shoulders, sending out business cards, but it's doesn't have to be that complicated. It could be straightforward as just talking to people and getting them to introduce you to other people and opening doors in a very casual way. And that's what I love about this, your story so far, is the fact that you had a loose idea, but you were also open to exploring where this idea can fit in within a career. So like, I know I want to use this language. I know I want to travel. I know I want to finally end up in Australia. How am I going to get there? And you're kind of almost working backwards a little bit from your plan and being open to, well, what seems interesting to me and how can I apply my goals to what seems interesting and take it to the next level. So love that.
So after that, then you started looking at jobs that you could be interested in. What were the next steps? Like, how did you end up in Hong Kong and Australia and all of that?
Well, yeah, I'll make this a short story, but yeah, look, a number of friends were like, "Hey, I've just started work at this company. You should come. Like, it's quite interesting. You come and interview." And so I did a few interviews, and then with one of my friends, he worked for a company that was importing vitamins to sell in China, and so I did the interview, met his boss, and they had a position. They were looking for somebody to train retail staff, how to sell products. And I just, I kind of said in the interview, look, it's great. It's not exactly what I'm looking to do. And so
you were saying that you went for the interview. You said it's not really what I want.
Yeah, look, I just was open and I said, look, that's not really what I'm looking for. And the guy who owned the company is like, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, let's get into sourcing. And he's like, okay, great. So we finished up. And I got a call about 2 weeks later, and he's like, why don't you come set up a sourcing division for us? And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So just being honest and open like that really put that idea in their mind too.
I love that though, because so many people feel like I can't give up an opportunity, that whole missing out thing, or just declining a role, but without communicating what they're in fact looking for. And this is the thing, you never know when opportunity can come and who can give it to you. So by not being verbal and expressing what you want to people, this is where you're going to miss out. This is why, again, this is another form of networking. People don't realize it, but talking to other people, say, look, this is what I'm really looking for. Even if that recruiter that you communicated with didn't have an opportunity, perhaps he knew of someone else. Recruiters know each other and people know each other within the industry as well. So he could have known of another opportunity. And that's the thing, that you, one, were honest and not just declining a role, where a lot of people do. They decline a role, they don't say why. They say, oh, maybe they'll go as far as saying, look, it's not for me, but they don't say or express what is for them. And this is what I love, the fact that you took your career in your own hands.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Okay, so that was really great, taking your career into your own hands, as Pauline said. And so when you spoke to him about that opportunity, what happened after that?
Well, look, I ended up deciding to take the job, and I had to figure out, how to do sourcing. So
how to do the job.
Yeah, how to do the job. So kind of got thrown into it. And
so sometimes being confident in yourself without actually having the experience to back you up can pay off.
Well, look, the good thing is that, there were connections through the job to companies that were looking for stuff to be produced, marketing materials, packaging materials, in China. And so we had some connections to start with. And then it was a matter of figuring out, all right, how to find the factories, how to get these things produced at the right price, how to export them. And so that's what I did for the next several years. Now, remembering the company's core business was importing vitamins, right? But through the sourcing, we got into working with some sports nutrition companies, and then ended up talking to them about opportunities to bring their products into China. All right, so over time, I was kind of making products in China, sending them out of China to South Africa, to America, to Canada, to different places, to Europe. But then the companies that we were dealing with, we started talking to them about bringing products back in. And so the shift for me it became more interesting to look at, these sports nutrition products and how we can bring them to China and get them established. And so I started, my role evolved, and I started working on that import side of things. And we got a couple of well-known companies that we started working with, Power Bar being one, and Cytosport the second. And it took it from there, and my role completely shifted into working in the import and sales side of the business, which is what I do today. Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's
amazing.
a slight, just something, another opportunity that arose, but it was an interest, and I followed that. And then, the long story short is that I ended up, how I got to Hong Kong, through one of the brands, Power Bar, that we picked up. They offered us the distribution rights for Hong Kong. And I started going to Hong Kong and talking to companies and put on a few clients, and then said, hey, listen, we should probably have an office there. Let me go down there and set up an office for you guys. And so I did that, moved to Hong Kong, got the business established, and then ended up, there, this was right around the time of the financial crisis, but ended up...
Perfect timing.
Yeah, great timing, right? But ended up...
You've had a few challenges with global crises.
Yeah, it happens, I guess. But yeah, look, that became a pretty difficult period for the company. And there was a time, so I was working out of a shared office with 4 other people, all doing their own businesses. And, at the time, my boss turned around and was like, look, I'm going to have to shut down the business. Just can't make it work anymore. And so
how did that make you feel in that moment?
Well, I didn't know what to do, right? Because I was like, oh, well, I feel like I've got this obligation to my customers here, right? So I was like,
right,
do I continue to, what do I do? Do I just stop, or do I keep going? Not sure what's next. Need to start looking for a job. And, so I was a bit conflicted, didn't really know what to do. I kept trading, kept things going along. For a couple of weeks as I was thinking about it, and then one of the guys in the office, he kind of saw that I was in a bit of a state, and he's like, "What's going on?" So I was telling him, and he's like, "Well, what do you actually do?" And so we sat down and over an evening and had a chat, and then he's just we ran through the numbers, and he's like, "Well, what if we took over this business?" So, I was quite unsure, but we did the calculations on the back of a napkin. Kind of said, all right, well, look, if we had some money and we can put it into this business, would it be profitable? And yes, it would be. And so he kind of convinced me to go into business for ourselves. All right, so we teamed up and we bought the business off my boss at the time. And that's
amazing.
How Nutrition Asia started in Hong Kong, and that's been my career since.
Sure. And the rest is history, as they say, right?
Yeah.
And obviously you moved again to Australia, so you've had multiple country changes.
Well, yeah, look, even starting the business in Hong Kong, right, we ended up growing and expanding into Singapore and then into Malaysia. And so, this, again, just following, we had, a customer of ours in Hong Kong that had expanded to Singapore, and they asked if we could service them over there. So looked into it, went across, did some recon, set up a business, sent some product across, and started trading in Singapore, right? So same thing happened with Malaysia. And then with Australia, I moved here for personal reasons, and I was here in Australia, and some of our suppliers knew that, so the opportunity arose where they were one of our brands that we represented was exiting Australia. They had their own team here, and they asked if we could take over. And so the opportunity came up to set up a business here in Australia as well. So we set up what is Nutrition APEC, which is an extension of the businesses in Asia. So again, just another opportunity that just came up at the right time.
It's
Where
interesting.
to next?
Yeah, because it seems a lot of you've had a lot of obstacles, a lot of, like I said, global crises that have happened, and things thrown your way where you've had to shift and reshape your career slightly. And yes, I agree with what you said. It all is about timing, and you have had a lot of things align well for you as well, but with an obstacle before that. So with all those challenges that you've faced, so what is it you feel that really helped you push through and stay on track and continue going forward?
Well, look, these challenges that, when you're faced with them, there's, I guess, two things you can do, right? Either you kind of succumb to them or you figure a way out of them, right? So it's always about looking at what is the opportunity, what's the silver lining? Like, is there a benefit? Again, with COVID, right? That was right when we were looking to start the Australia arm here, and it was just looking around the market. Terrible time to be like, hey, let's expand our business, right?
All your big changes seem to be when something's happening in the world.
But this is what I mean when you have to find an opportunity, and so when I looked at the market here, I thought, okay, well, look, everybody's kind of pulling back and being really conservative at the moment, and I thought there was an opportunity for to be a bit aggressive and to come into the market and to bring some brands into the market where everybody else was on the defensive. So it's all on how you look at it, right? And it's a roll of the dice, but sometimes you have to roll the dice, right, and back yourself to make things happen.
Well,
Love this
I
thinking.
think if you don't take risks, nothing will ever happen.
Well, that's it.
So you can.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah, I
important
was gonna say you can.
you to grow. Like challenges, no matter what form they come in, are opportunities to grow, right?
Yeah.
At this stage in my career, my biggest challenge at the moment is to take on a different role in pushing and driving the business. And for me, that's a big challenge, right? And it's one that it's quite hard, but again, it's another opportunity to learn and to pick up different skills and to expand your abilities to make sure they benefit what you're doing, right? And so that's now the focus, and how we drive our business forward. We're continually looking. Opportunities come, and they're calculated risks that we take to grow the business. But along with that, you have to grow as well, and that's the next challenge for me, is how to really step up and learn different aspects that I guess what's the right way to put it? Uncomfortable in doing so. How to be comfortably uncomfortable to move things forward.
Yeah, I like that. So it's interesting that you said that. So I'd be interested to know, how do you get those new skills? Do you do webinars, attend any events? What is it that you could suggest others to do to upskill themselves, especially when they're thinking or they need to change their career slightly or learn those new skills?
Well, look, I think there's many different forms. Again, talking to people, understanding the challenges that they faced, how they overcame them, what did they do. I think that's super important. Resources, podcasts, right, like you guys are doing, are quite often insightful. So a lot of times, listening to other people speak about their experiences, you can kind of relate to one of the things that they've said, and then it provides that context to follow and to look into different areas to how you might be able to replicate or learn or find out how they did it. Yeah, I think there's different resources that you can take. I'm not particularly good at following a lot of them. It's more, for me, it's more about talking to people and getting some advice on what I can do.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
You find what works for you, and that's what works for you, which is great. When you say listening to other people and seeing what worked for them, it won't necessarily work for you, but trying different things and figuring out what fits with you, what kind of learning style you have. Some people are visual, some people are audio. It really is what works, and holding on to that and pushing forward, which is what you've done with your networks and talking to people.
I think it's also learning sometimes on the job, but being aware and maybe even so a lot of people they make a lot of mistakes, but they don't recognize them and they keep repeating that. Being aware and at the end of the day, going back, assessing, okay, how did that go? Was it good? Was it bad? What went well? What didn't go well? And what changes I can make to make it better. And maybe it's about trying different styles and techniques that one feel comfortable with you, but also that yield the best results and that seem to be more successful and so cutting what didn't work. So, and that's about evolving yourself and your skills. So you can learn yourself as well by with this podcast and all, but also trial and error at
Well, a
times.
lot of times, right? It's like the one thing you can't be afraid to do is make mistakes, right? But as long as you own the mistakes and you learn from the mistakes, you don't make them multiple times. I mean, that's the process of learning, right? And quite often, new opportunities come through mistakes that were made, right? So when you look back and you say, okay, well, what could we have done differently? Well, we probably should have done this. And that leads to another door that takes you in another direction, right?
Well, what I was going to say was that I agree with what you said about making mistakes and learning from it, and finding the mistakes that you've made have led to something else. Because Pauline and I have done that, where we've looked back and gone, oh, we probably shouldn't have done that. But if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have learnt from it, and we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now. So you're
Okay.
spot on with that one.
Okay. So you do that. And then I think I might come in and wrap it up, sum it up going, okay, so basically what we've learned here is that one, you go to have at least an idea of your end goal, have network and connect with people, be open to opportunities, don't be afraid to make mistakes. And
Be flexible with the end goal too. So you could, like, your goal was to come back to Australia, and you've done that. It may not have been in the position that you thought it would be in, but that was the flexibility and your
right,
ability to shift with
right.
your career journey. So yeah, you're absolutely right with what you just said, Shawn. Pauline and I have experienced that ourselves, where we've done something and then we've looked back and thought, oh, we really shouldn't have done that. We've made a mistake, but we've learned from that mistake, and it's set us on a different path, which is just makes us more happier and knowing what we're doing and being able to adjust what we're doing with My Career Angels to be able to help others better. So it's really true with learn from your mistakes and see that silver lining where that mistake has led you to where you are today, hopefully in a positive view, of course.
That's right. And these mistakes and are also growth opportunities. And I feel personally, I believe that if we are not growing as individuals our whole lives, then we really are wasting opportunities for ourselves in living a more interesting life because we're not stagnant. We are forever moving forward. So I feel that from what I've heard, in order to have a great career journey in terms of reaching that end goal is one is having an end goal, having an idea of what it is, but of course not putting pressure that it needs to happen the way you want it to happen. In you have an idea, but it's not set in stone and how you're going to get there or the timeframes you're going to get there. The idea of being open to opportunities and to connect with people, communicate with people, and say yes, and be flexible and enjoy the journey of getting there rather than getting there, if anything.
Yeah, look, honestly, I think that you know that's quite an interesting comment because the journey ultimately, where does it end? Who knows? It continues in different forms, different fashion, and that's the fun, right? Is how does it unfold and where do you end up? And honestly, that for me, my experience has been that, you know, as in the moment as you sometimes get, if you actually take a step back and you look at kind of where you've come, where you started, and where you are now, and where you think you're going to get to, it's actually quite enjoyable. And
I love that.
yeah, and I think it's important to. There are certainly times when it's not enjoyable, but overall, when you know, looking at it, you know, it's on the whole, that process and that journey of getting to, or I guess your career or your work life unfolding in the way that it does is quite interesting, right? Like for everybody, I'm sure everyone has a story that's really interesting, that, you know, how they've gotten to where they are today. And for me, I think just sometimes taking stock of that and looking back is important, because it reinforces, hopefully for most people, that you've made the right choices, right? And that you're in the position that you want to be.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us
We
today.
appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have gotten a lot out of what you've said and the advice you've given regarding networking and not giving up and just putting yourself out there.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey, and it was exciting to follow along.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been nice to be a part of this, and hopefully a little bit of insight will be helpful to other people out there.
Oh, of
I'm sure.
course. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.